it is damn worth noting since 2016, like you said earlier, D-Lou, Florida State back into the college football playoff rankings. It's weird now. I have not put on ESPN. I don't know about you guys. I have not put on ESPN to watch the playoff rankings since that time when Florida State was in there. So when I saw Twitter and I saw our Discord blowing up, I was like, oh my gosh, I guess I got to start watching Tuesday night on ESPN when they release those rankings. It feels kind of good.
Hey guys, it's Terrence Mann. You're listening to Hear the Spear presented by Noel Game Day. Go Noles.
Hey, what's up? This is Peter Ward, a.k.a. E-Dub, in the house. So we're listening to Hear the Spear presented by Noel Game Day. Go live, go Noles.
Hi, this is Charlie Ward, and you're listening to Hear the Spear. Go Noles.
This is Terrell Buckley. You're listening to Hear the Spear presented by Noel Game Day. No Bloody.
But perhaps better known as the greatest corner to ever step on a football field, Deion Primetime Sanders.
Great Deion Sanders, my brother. What's going on, man? I could wake up to that greeting every day, man. That was awesome.
Hello, Noles fans. This is former Seminole Derek Brooks, and you're listening to Hear the Spear, presented to you by Noel Game Day.
James Wilder Jr. What's going on, James?
Thanks for having me on. FSOD, Florida State or Die, and go Noles.
William Bar None Floyd.
Gentlemen, what's up?
What's happening, guys? It's Logan Robinson from Hear the Spear, presented to you by NoelGameDay.com. We are live here on a beautiful Wednesday evening. Now dark. God, it gets dark at 6 o'clock now. It's one of the worst feelings ever. This time of year absolutely sucks, but we are still during football season, so it could be worse. It is Florida State versus Syracuse week. Florida State and Mike Norvell are going to travel on the road up to Syracuse. We have a special guest with us tonight to give us some good insight. We've been doing this all throughout the season, and I know a lot of the listeners, everybody watching on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, have been commenting, liking, having these guests on that give us some great insight into opposing teams coming up this weekend. This time it is Mike McAllister. Mike, excited to have you on to give us some really good info on Adino Baber's team that had a really good swing up in that beginning of the season. Now a little bit of a downward swing, but 2-6-3 teams going at it this weekend on Saturday night.
Yeah, first, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head. They started out 6-0. They were up to 14th in the country, and going into that Clemson game, there's a lot of chatter about them. How good are they? Are they for real? And they kind of controlled that Clemson game for most of it. Went into the fourth quarter with an 11-point lead. And, I think at that point, everyone was looking at Syracuse like they were for real and that they were a team to be reckoned with. And then they blow the fourth quarter against Clemson. They kind of get blown out by Notre Dame. And then they go play one of the worst 4 quarters of offensive football that you've seen from them, at least this season, in a loss at Pittsburgh. So definitely on the downswing a little bit right now. But, I think going into the season, this is kind of where Syracuse fans are, right? You start 6-0, expectations skyrocket. You lose 3 in a row. All of a sudden, everyone's ticked off. But yet, if you had said you'd be 6-3 going into the home finale before the season started, I think everyone would have been pretty happy with that.
For sure. And like you said, Syracuse got off to a really good start, struggling here as of late. Some injuries have contributed to those struggles. But I guess, in your opinion, what have been the biggest factors in that 6-0 start and then now in the 3-game skid?
Well, the Clemson and Notre Dame games I kind of set aside because those teams are supposed to have a lot more talent than a team like Syracuse, especially with the way they recruit. And Notre Dame especially was just a really bad matchup for Syracuse with the 3-3-5 defense that they play. Their defensive line is generally a little bit on the undersized side, especially in the middle of the defensive line. And we know Notre Dame's offensive line is usually massive, as a bunch of future NFL guys on it. And they just ran the ball down Syracuse's throat, and there wasn't much Syracuse could do. From the injury standpoint you mentioned, that's part of that as well. They lost starting defensive tackle Terry Lockett for the season. They've lost one of their starting linebackers, Stephon Thompson, for the season. They were 2 guys that they counted on quite a bit to help stop the run, so that certainly has hurt them as well. But then the game against Pittsburgh, that was a situation where they didn't have Garrett Schrader, and I think the whole offense just took a giant step backwards behind their backup quarterback, Carlos Del Rio Wilson. Del Rio Wilson's a former 4-star quarterback, went to Florida out of high school, transferred out because he didn't think he was going to get playing time, came to Syracuse to try to be the future quarterback there. He's got a lot of talent, but he just doesn't have any experience, and that kind of was a big issue for Syracuse offensively. They missed Schrader's leadership and his playmaking ability with his legs, and that really hurt them against Pittsburgh. The other issue has been that they haven't run the ball nearly as well this year as they did last year, which you wouldn't expect when you've got a guy like Sean Tucker and you've had Garrett Schrader for the first 8 games of the season. You'd expect that they'd be running the ball really well. And yet even though they've been one of the top, 2 or 3 teams in the ACC in terms of rushing offense this year, it hasn't looked the same as it did last year when it was, with Sean Tucker had just a monster year. Part of that is due to some issues along the offensive line. Part of that is due to Sean Tucker just hasn't quite looked right. We don't know if he's dealing with an injury. Syracuse is usually pretty tight-lipped with that. But also, they lost their lead blocker, Chris Elmore, in the season opener. And it's hard to replace him. He plays fullback, tight end. He's good in pass protection, but he's an outstanding lead blocker. And they haven't had him since the first half of the season opener, and I think that's hurt the run game as well. So kind of all of those factors have sort of reared their ugly head in these last 3 games.
Yeah, Florida State went through a 3-game stretch too where they were hurting a lot with injuries and ended up costing them with losses. Going just strictly to Schrader, what are your feelings about him and potentially being available this upcoming weekend? Because, like you said, that changes a lot of the flow there for that offense. His leadership is huge. Florida State's seen a big jump with leadership too with Jordan Travis and how well that offense runs. So it goes the same way for Schrader on that side of the ball for Dino Babers coming into this game. What are your thoughts? I know that y'all don't really get to go and see the practices. Y'all have the press conferences on Mondays, and you know how college football coaches talk. It's either we're going to find out on 7:45 when we're going through warmups, or we're just not going to find out at all until the snap happens. What are your feelings on if we'll see Garrett Schrader out there on Saturday night?
We definitely get a lot of coach speak when it comes to injuries. And Dino Babers' famous term is he just says that Garrett Schrader has an owie. That's how he refers to it. If the guy's not out for the season, he has an owie. That's what Dino says. And that's basically all you get out of it. So, I kind of have a feeling that he's going to try to gut it out and go this week. We won't know officially. It'll be one of those game time decision type of situations. But I just kind of have a feeling he's going to try to gut it out, especially after watching the way that, the Pittsburgh game went down and how much they struggled offensively. But he's got to be healthy. And he's got to be healthy enough to at least run the football. That was kind of the issue in the Notre Dame game was he was hurt going into that game. He apparently had hurt himself, I think, during practice the week before. And he's usually a quarterback that's very mobile and runs the ball quite a bit and quite effectively, can turn plays where teams seem to have him ready to knock him down for a sack, and he can escape pressure and turn that into positive gain and scramble and pick up 3rd and long with his legs. And yet against Notre Dame, he had 1 run in the entire first half, and then he got taken out because he was too hurt to go the rest of the way. If he's not healthy enough that he can take off and run, even if he's out there, I think that puts Syracuse's offense at a significant disadvantage against the Florida State defense that's fast and athletic and has some players I really like on it. And, so it's going to be interesting to see if he does go, exactly how healthy he is. Because if he can't run the football, personally, I think you're better off going with the backup.
Everyone kind of knows about Sean Tucker. That's really the offensive star when you look over at Syracuse. I know you've mentioned he's had maybe a little bit of a slow start here this year, but still a guy that's over 700 yards on the ground, has scored 9 touchdowns. He's a capable weapon to be dealt with. But outside of that, the rest of the Syracuse offense, can you tell us about some of the other playmakers that we can expect to see on Saturday night contributing for the Orange?
Yeah, the number one guy that you're going to want to look at is Oronde Gadsden. He's been the number one target in the passing game. He starts at tight end, but he's kind of a tight end wide receiver hybrid. They do a lot of things with him. They'll line him up in the traditional tight end spot. They'll put him out in the slot. They'll even put him outside once in a while. But he's, if the name sounds familiar, he's the son of former Miami Dolphins wide receiver Oronde Gadsden. Same name. So obviously he's got NFL bloodlines, and he's a great route runner, has excellent hands, He's one of those guys that he's too big for a defensive back, but too fast for a linebacker type of guys. And they've used that to their advantage a lot this season. So he leads the team in catches, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. So in the passing game, he's definitely the guy you're going to want to keep an eye on. Otherwise, to be honest with you, no one else from the wide receiver core has really stepped up and done much. It's been very inconsistent. You've had, a game where Devon Cooper has 4 or 5 catches, and then you don't hear from him for a couple of games. Damian Alford is a wide receiver who did a few things last year as a freshman, flashed a little bit, and I think there were some expectations he was going to take a step forward this year. And he'll have games where he'll have an incredible catch down the field, and that will be the only time you'll hear from him all game. He's really only catching the ball once or twice a game, if at all. And so there's been a lot of inconsistencies among that group. They've had some issues with drops in a couple of games. So really, if you're Florida State going into this game, you feel like if you can shut down and try to limit Sean Tucker in the rushing game and control Oronde Gadsden as a receiver, I don't think you really fear anyone else on the Syracuse offense at this point.
Do you think Sean Tucker's fully healthy? I heard some ramblings on Twitter and such. It doesn't seem like he's a fully healthy guy right now.
He doesn't. And yeah, again, as I said before, Syracuse is very tight-lipped with injuries, so we haven't been told anything. We haven't even been given the owie declaration on Sean Tucker, but he hasn't looked the same. Even he's had moments, he had the 200 and some odd yard rushing game, 5 touchdown game against Wagner earlier this year. In the season opener against Louisville, he had a rushing touchdown, a receiving touchdown, and 160 all-purpose yards. Looked pretty good. He's had a couple of other moments against NC State. He had, some good moments there, but he really hasn't looked like the same explosive, dynamic player as he did last year. Part of that, I think, is the offense trying to be a little bit more versatile and not rely on him to create offense all the time. So part of it is offensive philosophy, but even when he has touched the ball quite a bit, he just hasn't quite looked the same. He's gotten up slow on multiple occasions. So I've wondered all year if there's something that's going on with him, some sort of nagging issue that we don't know about.
On the positive side of things, what do you think Syracuse this year, going on that run there, what do you have seen the most in growth out of Dino Babers this year? And, Florida State Dino Babers coaches a really good game against Florida State. He's done that in years past. Last game being 33-30. What do you think the biggest growth you've seen specifically from Babers' team?
I think it was offensively. Defensively, he kind of turns that over to Tony White and lets Tony White do his thing. And since he's come over a few years ago, the Syracuse defense has been pretty good with that 3-3-5 scheme. And they're pretty good again this year, especially, in the linebackers and in the secondary. Defensive line obviously is a weakness, as I mentioned before, but the back end of the defense is really good. So offensively, though, last year they had a lot of issues with not being versatile enough to throw the football. It was run, and teams, as the season went along, were stacking the box against Syracuse, putting 8-9 guys in the box and saying, we're daring you to throw the ball, and Syracuse couldn't. This year, the offense has been better, more versatile, and keeping teams honest because they've been able to throw the ball a little bit. They've used the middle of the field, which they didn't do at all last year. They've thrown the ball to the tight end position, which they didn't do at all the last couple of years. So it's really those types of things. And, I think being willing to stick some young players in there from time to time, which, hasn't always happened in years past. But it's one of those things where I think a large part of the success is also developing players inside the program. And you get to a year like this where you've got a core group of veteran players who have experience at Syracuse within their system and also have some talent that they've been able to develop over a few years.
Going over to the other side of the ball, seemed like Syracuse during that 6-0 start defensively, they really did a good job of limiting the run. I think we're allowing under 100 yards a game during the 6-game winning streak. And now over these 3 losses have allowed over 230 yards a game, as well as 8 touchdowns on the ground in these past 3. So Florida State, obviously, they're going to be running it a lot with that 3-headed monster of Treshaun Ward. It seems like he could probably be back this weekend. Trey Benson and Lawrence Toafili. What do you think? It seems like Syracuse is going to have to limit Florida State's rushing attack to be able to pull off a win in this game. So how do you think they're going to be able to do so against all of those backs that FSU has?
Well, I think they took a positive step forward last week against Pittsburgh. Even though Pittsburgh ran for 160 yards, they only averaged 3.4 yards a carry. And, they kind of had some better moments early in that game. And then as the game went along, the run defense for Syracuse stiffened up a little bit. So that, I think that was a positive step forward in terms of what they were able to do. But there's no question the last 3 games it's been an issue, especially against Clemson and Notre Dame. Now, those offensive lines are different than a lot of teams.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Florida State poses a unique challenge in that they're going to have 3 guys that are going to rotate in and out. As you said, Notre Dame did that very effectively, and that was a problem that Syracuse really struggled with. But on top of that, what Florida State has that Notre Dame didn't have and Pittsburgh didn't have is they have a mobile quarterback. And they have a mobile quarterback that can throw the football. So against Clemson, they actually took out DJ because he was so ineffective against Syracuse, and they brought in their freshman superstar, and he had some success running the ball, but he really didn't do much with his arm. And so Syracuse's secondary was pretty good against him. The challenge here is, and then you look at Notre Dame and Pittsburgh, and they didn't have a mobile quarterback. The challenge with Florida State is not only do they have that dynamic ground game just with the running backs, but they've got Jordan Travis, who can beat you with his legs, as he did last year when these 2 teams played against Syracuse. He had a big game with his legs, but he can also throw the ball. He's shown a lot of improvement this year as a thrower of the football, something I've been very impressed with when I've watched Florida State play 3 or 4 times this year. So it's a unique challenge. It's sort of the worst parts from a Syracuse perspective of the last 3 games all rolled into one. So we'll see if they've learned anything. I think the big thing is the linebackers have to be up there and be able to make plays. The interior of the defensive line can't get pushed around as much as they have been in the last couple of games. And if they can do those things, then they've got a shot to at least limit Florida State's rushing attack enough that they can give their offense a chance.
I want to go on a player that, you were kind of mentioning a little bit of some Florida State players that of or keeping an eye on going into this game. One of those guy that y'all have faced before with Jared Verse, Florida State's transfer defensive end from Albany. Just about the threat from him. What do you think this impact and how, Syracuse is going to have to stop him? Because, he's kind of been on a tear. It doesn't seem like he's fully at 100%, although his mindset definitely seems to be that way, but still hindering that knee injury that he had way back against Louisville. What do you think, going into this game, looking at Jared Verse, the game plan, stopping a guy that has been on a run the last couple of weeks?
Well, I think it's going to depend where he lines up. If he lines up opposite Matthew Bergeron, I think Syracuse is going to let Matthew Bergeron try to block him because he's gotten some buzz as a potential first-round NFL draft pick, and Syracuse feels pretty comfortable with Matthew Bergeron going up against pretty much anyone. And that's, when he's your best offensive lineman, you have to be able to trust him in one-on-one situations, even against a really good player lining up opposite him. If he lines up on the other side, which I'm sure Florida State will try to do because I think they'll have an advantage there, then I expect Syracuse to do some things like they're going to chip him, they're going to bring a tight end over, or bring a fullback over and try to double him a little bit to limit his effectiveness. It's interesting, though, as you mentioned, they faced him last year when he was at Albany. He kind of made a name for himself because he almost chased down Sean Tucker. Sean Tucker broke away on a run, and he chased him down and was actually closing the gap on Sean Tucker, and a guy that size shouldn't be able to run that fast. And when he entered the portal, one of the first teams that went after him was Syracuse. They had coaches on him immediately trying to get him up for an official and almost trying to get him to commit because they knew he was going to blow up and that they were going to have stiff competition if he didn't commit right away. And then he just starts getting offers from everywhere and ends up going to Florida State. So it's always interesting seeing those guys that both teams targeted, and he ends up in one place and goes and plays against the other. But yeah, I think Syracuse is going to have their hands full with him, and being able to contain him is going to be an important part of Syracuse's offense being able to have success. And they've had that issue the last 2 weeks going against, a good Notre Dame defensive line and a good Pittsburgh defensive line. And both of those teams had success against Syracuse, and that was part of why they struggled offensively. The offensive line for Syracuse is going to have one of its best games of the season if they're going to be able to move the ball consistently.
Going back to the defensive side of the ball, it seems like Syracuse has been really opportunistic this season, forcing 16 turnovers, 3 defensive touchdowns. So just why have they had such a high propensity for forcing these turnovers? And do you think they're going to need to get multiple turnovers on Saturday night to shut down Florida State's offense?
Well, I'd say yes, but 2 of the last 3 games, they've won the turnover battle by multiple turnovers and have lost. They forced 4 turnovers at Clemson and won it +3. They forced 2 turnovers against Pittsburgh and they were +2 on that and lost both games. So, you figure in those 2 games combined, they're +5 in turnovers. You'd figure they'd win those games pretty easily. So, yeah, I mean, I do think they have to win the turnover battle. Part of the reason that they've been able to do that is because the strength of their defense, as I mentioned, is the back end. It's the linebackers, their playmaking ability, and it's especially in the secondary where they've got multiple guys that are ball hawks or good cover corners in Deuce Chestnut. And even though Garrett Williams is out for the season, Isaiah Johnson is a transfer in from Dartmouth is the other corner. He's 6'3", he's long, and he's been really good in coverage since he's taken over for Garrett. And then Jihad Carter has been a real gem for them this year as a safety. He's got multiple picks. He's been all over the field. He has a scoop and score against Clemson. He picked up a fumble, ran it back for a touchdown. So they've got a bunch of guys who are ball hawks and opportunistic and take advantage of opportunities that are there. And when they have been able to get pressure on the quarterback, that's helped them as well. So, it's because of the scheme, but it's also because, the secondary and the linebacking group is deep and talented.
I've only got one left, and I think Dealer, that was it for him. I want to ask you, Mike, don't want to ask for a specific score prediction on this. Let your readers get that later on in the week, but I want to get your feel for this game overall. A team that's probably a little feisty now on the losing streak side of things. We saw the same thing with Florida State, not happy. We saw pissed off Jordan Travis after those losses, and it turned into being something better later on. But what do you think with this team overall? What do you think just the vibes and everything in the Carrier Dome? It's going to be on Saturday night.
Not the Carrier Dome anymore. That was the most disappointing part of my research.
Oh, no.
It's the JMA Wireless Dome, which is just a
We won't be calling it that. Yeah, we won't be calling it that.
No, the locals don't call it that either. If it makes
exactly. I'm trying to fit in, Mike. I'm trying to fit in, but don't have to give a score prediction. But overall feeling going into this one for Syracuse.
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of conundrum in that I feel like Syracuse is going to come in and play desperate. They play better at home than they do on the road typically under Dino Babers, and that's held true so far this year. But at the same time, I think Florida State's a bad matchup for Syracuse in a lot of ways. The Florida State's rushing attack being one of them. Syracuse's offensive line hasn't been that good in the last 2 games, especially, and they were without their starting left guard, Kalen Ellis, in the last game. We don't know if he's going to be back for this game. That's a huge part of their rushing attack, is he's a very good run blocker, and he's a huge guy at like 350 pounds or so. So, I think there's going to be some issues there, but I do expect Syracuse is going to come out and be desperate and play hard and play with a lot of energy. And as you said, play a little bit pissed off because they lost 3 in a row. The crowd's going to be good. It has been all year, and that will certainly help them. But, I think right now Florida State's a better football team. And, they're favored by 6.5 points. I think last I checked on the line, I think that seems about right. I think you go into it feeling like Florida State's, a touchdown to a touchdown and a half better than Syracuse. And if Syracuse is going to pull off an upset over a ranked team at home, then they've got to have some things go their way. That means good special teams play. That means getting a couple of turnovers. And, that means a couple of guys that are stepping in place of some injured guys, playing perhaps a little bit above their head. I think they're capable of doing those things. I just don't think that it's realistic to expect it going into it this year, going into it this week. But it's college football. Anything can happen. Anybody can beat anybody. And I think Florida State's good. I think they're worthy of being a ranked team right now, but they're not, a top 10 team that you look at it from a Syracuse perspective and say the talent gap is so wide. We need some sort of miracle in order to win this game. You just say, well, we need a couple of things to bounce our way. And Syracuse is hoping that the home field advantage can help some of those things happen.
Yeah. Florida State. Dino Babers, like I said earlier, Dino knows how to coach against Florida State and has had some good luck in a lot of ways. But, this is a Saturday night game, always late. Isn't it fun being up so late during the season, Mike, like this? It's like
I like night games.
Thank you.
It's fun, while you're there and watching it, whatever, but it certainly kills your sleep schedule.
Yep.
But, I think, hey, if we get a game that was as entertaining as last year's was, I think everyone, regardless of obviously one fan base is going to be upset at the end of it. But from my perspective, if it's a game as entertaining as last year's was back and forth and right down to the end, I think you can't ask for much more than that.
Yep, absolutely. So this game is going to be on 8 p.m. ACC Network primetime there. So, Mike, appreciate you coming on here, Fan Nation, and also Sports Illustrated's all Syracuse friends over there on the publisher. Make sure you guys go check out that. I know they got some good content coming up and more throughout the week. So, Mike, appreciate you coming on here to give us some fantastic insight to all of our listeners.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. That was awesome, and looking forward to do some collaboration with y'all later this week. So yeah, make sure to check that out on NoleGameDay.com and all Syracuse as well.
Absolutely.
Yep. Appreciate you, Mike.
Thanks, guys.
So that was Mike McAllister. Great insight there on Syracuse and Dino Babers' team as Florida State is going to travel up there this upcoming weekend for an 8 p.m. kickoff. Florida State on a roll right now, already bowl eligible, looking to get 7 wins on the season. Before we move into the rest of the show, already heard a lot from Dustin Lewis, our editor-in-chief at NoleGame.com. Down below is Austin Veazey going to bring back the banner below where it says that he's sad about Florida State's basketball season so far, but he's only a basketball writer who does a fantastic job no matter what the score is nor the record. Does a great job for NoleGame.com. But Veazey down below. Gentlemen, great stuff there from Mike. Florida State is going bowling, gentlemen. I know we already did our instant recap to the Miami game, which was definitely fun to talk. That was our longest one of the season. It's easy to do that when Florida State has a dominating performance like they did. But what a fun week it's been overall, if you don't include basketball under there, to see FSU Twitter just absolutely bullying the Miami Twitter all throughout the week.
It's deserved. Miami fans deserve it. They acted like, oh, thank you for having Manny Diaz fired and whatnot. Then you lose at 42, or lose by 42 at home. All the jokes were flying, from Harry line jokes to your team sucks jokes. They were all there, and it was fun to watch.
And not only that, I mean, the team is having a lot of fun as well. Obviously, Florida State has moved back into the top 25, 25th in the AP poll, 23rd in the college football playoff poll, which first appearance there since 2016 for the Seminoles. And I mean, that's kind of continued on to the practice field this week. The players, Logan, I think we can both say they're having a lot more fun. It's a lot more loose out there than it was during that 3-game losing streak a couple of weeks ago. You're seeing a couple more smiles, some more fun, but then the practices have also still been intense. There's been execution, and it seems like this team's really focused on trying to finish the season the right way, which, they're already bowl eligible, but you win 2 out of the 3 or 3 out of the 3 final regular season games, you're talking maybe a premier bowl destination. And I mean, that changes things for Mike Norvell and Florida State.
As always, you can listen to podcasts on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. If you're on iTunes, feel free to rate 5 stars. Leave a review if you're on YouTube. Hit the like button, share with your friends. We're live every Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. We're always trying to bring on a guest. So I appreciate Mike hopping on here earlier. If you're just got on here, make sure you guys go to the beginning of the show and listen to that preview there. And we'll be giving our score predictions near the end of the show. Also getting our thoughts from Austin after a pretty embarrassing loss, one of the worst in program history under Leonard Hamilton, the Florida State basketball team. But let's head to some positive things here. We did a full 30-minute recap, so there's not much more we need to do on Florida State versus Miami, where they went down and won 45-3. But let's jump into a few practice notes. D-Lou, we were there Tuesday and also today. And also let's talk some quick hitters regarding Sam McCall and a position change for a true freshman on the offensive line. Let's start with Sam McCall, because that one's a little bit more earlier in the week, which happened after Florida State takes down Miami. You start seeing a post from Sam McCall, Florida State's highest rated recruit coming into this class from last year. Really promising player in that defensive backfield for Adam Fuller and Marcus Woodson. He puts out on Instagram that he has intentions on transferring. Then he puts out an Instagram story saying that nothing is official yet. And then that Instagram post gets taken down. The story goes down. And then we see him at practice on Tuesday morning. D-Lou, you put out a piece about it. But, we talked with Mike Norvell on Tuesday. Also, he tipped at it a little bit today again, but more on Tuesday, saying, no, I was 18 years old once. And he felt like this was just an emotional thing. I kind of go back and look at Azrae Thomas on getting that interception against Miami. Maybe there was a little bit of some playing time jealousy there of somewhat, but he's back in the fold. He was back practicing Tuesday, Wednesday, and he looked good. But you want to have Sam McCall back in the fold, because he's going to be a factor next season if we're talking Jamie Robinson and Akeem Dent leaving next year.
Yeah, I think you said it pretty well there. Sam McCall didn't get a chance to appear against Miami, and maybe that miffed him a little bit, and just kind of an emotional response with the social media post. And I think FSU's staff kind of had a conversation with him, and everything is back in good standing at this point. And like you said, Sam McCall out at practice this week, continuing to take reps at cornerback, also spending some time at safety, which is kind of where we thought his position would be coming into the college level. And then during special teams, especially today, some tremendous kick returns. So I think when you look at this week of practice he's responded the right way, of what you would call some maybe drama. But regardless, I think McCall's bounced back. The coaches there's nothing there. They're still coaching him the same way. I saw there was a miscommunication today in the defensive backfield, and him and Adam Fuller had a good talk about it for a couple of minutes. Then later on in practice, Sam McCall red tape Rodemaker perfectly and bounced and was right there for an interception. Went through his hands, but regardless, was in the bounce back and was in the right position to make a play. But I just think, you look at social media, these are 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old kids. Sometimes some of this stuff is going to trickle out. I think Florida State would have wished they could have kept this more of in-house. But regardless, I would consider this issue, if you even call it an issue, squashed at this point of the season. Obviously, the NCAA has instituted transfer portal windows now, which I believe the first one will open up in December-ish once the bowl games are announced, if I'm correct. I'm still not 100% certain on that. And then there's another window in the spring. So that's when we'll truly see if maybe McCall or some other players on the roster decide to enter their names into the transfer portal. But as of right now, not a whole lot to worry about.
No, I don't think so too. Mike said it straight up. This is a younger player, and either there was some miscommunication on things. We've seen that throughout the last couple of years at Florida State, and things get fixed. And it was good to see him flash a lot throughout practices. And it's not like he's not getting opportunities. He's not on scout team. Him and Azrae Thomas have not been on scout team since their arrival at Florida State. And it goes to show the trust and the belief and the factor of them eventually getting playing time. As we see Azrae Thomas, he got big. He got a bigger start over Sam McCall just because of what we saw in the spring going into fall camp. He was getting more opportunities. So I think this is playing time primarily, but I think we're going to see more out of Sam McCall. But Mike Norvell is a coach where that's just because you put that out on Instagram and you want to transfer means, okay, this next week I've got to put you in the game. I've got to get you in there to save you, make sure that you're not going to transfer anywhere. I think it's going to be earned. It's got to be earned, and that's just how Coach Norvell is. It's not going to be a whole, all right, the publicity, you got it. Now we got to give you attention. The media like us are giving you attention, showing that you're at practice, so now let's go ahead and get you in the game more. Azrae Thomas has just earned that more, but it's all about developing. And if you look at next season, after the season, we're going to preview a lot of these guys that are leaving. Sam McCall is going to play a lot of football in Garnet Gold next season.
Right. And I mean, I think at this point, maybe a little bit of a short-sighted move because, like you said, Jamie Robinson and Akeem Dent, it seems like they're both primed to make that move to the NFL following the season. And with Sam McCall taking increasing reps at safety, that could mean a potential move there and to be a replacement alongside Shaheem Brown for those two guys. So we'll just have to see how it plays out. I think Thomas has refined a little bit more quickly at the cornerback position. And I mean, when you just look at it, Renardo Green, Gavin Knowles, Amarion Cooper, Jarian Jones, there's guys in that room that have played a lot of football at Florida State. And it's going to take a certain something that the coaching staff is going to have to see for them to put a true freshman in over those guys who have already played in these big moments. I know there have been some ups and downs, but they have been out there and have contributed over the last 2 or 3 years at Florida State. So McCall just hasn't shown that just yet. He's a little bit raw, but over time, this kid definitely has the skill set, the capability to be a difference maker at Florida State. And it's different for every single player. I don't think progression is a linear thing. Some guys can come in and contribute out of the gate. Some guys, it takes a couple of years. Look at the progression that Jordan Travis has made over 3 or 4 years. It just takes time in a college program and a certain system. It just takes time for different amount of time for every single guy. And I think McCall is eventually going to get there.
Oh, absolutely. We saw it in the spring. We saw flashes. We were writing about it, tweeting about it. Sam McCall, physical attributes, everything like that. And you got to be excited about hopefully having him back and, rolling next year alongside Azare Thomas too. There's a lot of positivity. Definitely, we've seen him. They've been testing the waters a little bit at the safety position too, played it in high school. So I don't think there's too much to worry about right now. Mike Norvell and the staff took care of what needed to be done and got the communication over. So, I don't think this is something to really monitor too much heading into the rest of the season and into the offseason, which makes it crazy to think, man, we're getting close to the offseason. Even though Florida State does have a bowl game, that is going to be fun. We don't have to just sit here and talk about the next season. We get to talk about a potential or a bowl game that Florida State will be playing on later next month. So let's jump into those college football playoff rankings real quick. Don't want to spend too much time on it, but it is damn worth noting. Since 2016, like you said earlier, D-Lou, Florida State back into the college football playoff rankings. It's weird now. I have not put on ESPN. I don't know about you guys. I have not put on ESPN to watch the playoff rankings since that time when Florida State was in there. So when I saw Twitter and I saw our Discord blowing up, I was like, oh my gosh, I guess I got to start watching Tuesday night on ESPN when they release those rankings. It feels kind of good to get. I know FSU fans too. Florida State, if they were to come away with win against Syracuse, are going to be keeping a good eye on the TV on Tuesday nights. But, shout out to Florida State being ranked there now in the top 25 of those college football playoff rankings since all the way 2016.
Shows the progression that the program has made under Mike Norvell, and they could be a little bit even higher up if they hadn't slipped up in one of those games against Wake or NC State or Clemson. And, number 23, it's a nice start for Florida State. Linebacker Kalen DeLoach was actually asked about it at practice today. And I think he said it's not good enough, and I think that's how Florida State should feel about this. It's good to be back into the top 25, but there's still ways for this program to climb to get back to where it belongs.
I don't think I've watched the college football playoff rankings since 2014. And I heard those fools talk so much about game control that I never wanted to listen to them again. So as well as Florida State's been doing recently, I don't care. I'm glad they're ranked. They deserve it. And like Dustin said, if you beat NC State, if you somehow come back and beat Clemson, you're higher up. But I don't care about their opinion, honestly.
It's definitely a political thing. I think it's just more of just showing the climb that Mike Norvell has had. I mean, now the theme that he's scripted is right on. I mean, the climb, and you look back at the NC State game where Florida State should have came away with the win there, and a lot of those other losses being one-possession games, it just shows the growth there that Mike Norvell has had. And it will be fun, though, to go back. Definitely if Florida State is able to come away with the win on the road this Saturday to see, hey, I got something to watch on Tuesday nights because there's nothing else. I know y'all got basketball, but I don't watch basketball that much until the Warriors get to the playoffs. But
I don't even think you watch it then.
I watched the first game and then I'm like, oh, wait, they got to play again and again and again. But Tuesday nights to watch ESPN feels like old memories, man. I was back in high school during that time.
Young buck.
Dustin was still in
man, he's
college.
coughing. I pretty much still am in college.
Yeah, I'm definitely sick. I'm sick, so we're holding on by a straw. I'm sweating right now, but we got to get a podcast done. We got to get this is a good season for Florida State, so I'm just going to sweat it out, whatever I've got going on. Let's jump into some practice things real quick, including a position change for Antavious Woody, D-Lou.
Yeah,
I noted on this last week in our Discord. Make sure you guys are jumping in there. It's free to jump in and get a lot of this scoop. Make sure you join the Patreon too. But I was watching Antavious Woody. I was like, okay, hold up now. They got him at a defensive tackle, mainly whenever they're going against one-on-ones there. Coach Odell Higgins along with Alex Atkins will head over to the end zone. They'll spend about 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes of offensive line going against defensive line. Then you'll have 2v2s going at each other, picking up blocks. But Antavious Woody, a guy that's not easy to miss because of his size and what he is as a true freshman, big guy. But Mike Norvell confirmed with us, talked with him, asked him yesterday on Antavious Woody's position change, and it became official too. D-Lo, you put out a piece. It's official. Antavious Woody over to defensive tackle, which he played at in high school. A lot of people wanted him at defensive tackle, but it seems like they feel pretty confident in what they have at offensive line. If you think about it, they have a lot of true freshmen there at offensive line right now, and they're only building into more of this upcoming class once they build and grab more guys. But Woody, now defensive tackle. I personally am a big fan. If you go back and watch some of his tape, you get a lot of Timmy Jernigan vibes, just a really physical lineman that, Odell Higgins is probably licking his chops of what he can do with him.
As you noted, saw this last week. Didn't know if maybe it was just for him to emulate Miami's Leonard Taylor on the scout team. And at the time, we had reached out to Florida State and asked about it, and they said that there was no official comment on any position change. And then on Sunday night, we were informed by the program that Woody had been moved from offensive line to defensive line. And I think for him, you just kind of see the natural instincts. You mentioned the physicality. That's the first thing that pops out. I mean, this kid's just trying to rip your head off. On Tuesday, going up against Thomas Schrader, I mean, just put him right on his back. And then today, just watching him in team drills over there in one-on-ones against the offensive line. He has a very low center of gravity, and he just engages you with the mentality that he's going to put you on your back. And I think that's exactly what you want to see from a defensive tackle. Maybe a little bit of, there's still some steps to make as far as understanding the system and technique. But if you have a guy out there that can violently plug up a hole and take out a blocker or two, that's exactly what you want from a defensive tackle. And the early signs have definitely been productive for Woody at his new position. And Mike Norvell sounds like he's been happy with that so far, and we'll see where it goes from here.
Yeah, and Kanaya Charlton is one that went against him on Tuesday, and those two back-to-back reps, Antavious Woody won, and we've seen flashes from Kanaya Charlton. Kanaya Charlton's not a scout team player. That guy's stressed out in his number, and Kanaya Charlton is no small human being. We knew that since arriving at Florida State, but to see those reps and also put some guys on their back, that just shows, Woody, his physicality. Mike Norvell said he's at 315 to 320 pounds. I definitely think there could be some trimming done there, but he shouted out, he said he's been great in the weight room, and it goes to show too his power is enormous. So if you look now at that defensive line room, Dustin, Odell Higgins, he's like, I'm coming back next year. I got another year of coaching, man. It just won't ever end. But you look at Ayobame Tafasi, who is also doesn't look like a true freshman whatsoever. Bishop Thomas, and also Daniel Lyons. Daniel Lyons, who has had the biggest growth and development under Odell Higgins. You are starting to get really excited about the future of that defensive line room. And those are just the young guys. Think about the guys that are veterans that have a potential of coming back next season.
You said it perfectly. It really feels like Fabian Lovett and Robert Cooper, they're going to make that leap to the NFL, and that leaves behind, Jarrett Jackson, Malcolm Ray, Joshua Farmer, who we've raved about a ton, and then those four true freshmen you just mentioned, along with Florida State right now, 4-star defensive tackle KJ Sampson, who's been committed to FSU since March. He's going to be coming into the fold as well. I believe he's an early enrollee, so that's someone that'll be getting involved as soon as January, who knows, a guy with that talent, maybe he somehow works his way past some of those younger guys and gets into the rotation as well. We're just going to have to see. But I really feel like there shouldn't be a huge drop-off for Florida State on that interior defensive line, because you've got 3 guys who have started over the last couple of years who are just going to continue to grow. And then those true freshmen have a lot of promise as well, especially, we haven't even gotten a chance to see Tafasi in game action yet. Woody's just starting to get some of these reps at defensive tackle. Sky is really the limit for that interior, and then we'll talk about it on the edge as well. But you've got, we all know about Patrick Payton, but another redshirt freshman who's beginning to flash now that he's healthy, Byron Turner Jr.
Yeah, I know. Let's jump into some practice observations real quick before we let VZ go and give his take on basketball real quick.
Yeah, we need to do that.
Yep, let's go into some practice observations. Byron Turner, I know you want to mention him. You always keep a close eye on him throughout practices, but all throughout the week, the main thing that I'm getting out of this, the theme, is a happy squad. It makes sense. Yes, you just beat your rival, and you got a winning streak going right now. But Florida State, the coaching staff, the players, the competitiveness, it doesn't feel like we are in almost close to the middle of November to me, Dustin. Like, this team was banged up earlier. This team is getting healthier and healthier and healthier, and that we'll talk about that going into the Syracuse preview when we give our predictions. But this team is excited to be out there, excited to compete, a lot still of accountability too, a lot of listening, a lot of hard coaching too from Mike Norvell. The energy just doesn't stop. But just the theme overall, man, this team really likes being out there together right now with one another.
For sure. There's been no drop-off in practice. I know whenever we had Jakai on here last week, talked a little bit about maybe some guys can not get caught going through the motions, but you just kind of get used to the daily grind of going to practice and preparing for the opponent, especially now when this is your 10th time doing it this year. But like you said, Florida State, they're having a ton of fun out there. There hasn't been any drop in the focus or the intensity, and these guys, they're just enjoying playing football. I know Mike Norvell said earlier this week that this is some of the most fun that he's ever had coaching football, and I think it's just seeing the hard work pay off. These guys did a lot over the offseason and the tour of duty and spring practice and over the summer. So for Florida State to have this type of winning season where they're able to achieve postseason eligibility with still a quarter of the year left to play, there's definitely some positive vibes going through the program, and it's just showing that what they've done has paid off to this point. And I think they're just looking forward to continuing to kind of reap the rewards here. You're muted.
One player that really stood out to me this morning was Brian Corney, true freshman tight end that dominated in the red zone catches, one-on-ones, and got to say they were against 2 veteran safeties with Akeem Dent and Jamie Robinson. Jamie Robinson was not so happy. He sat there, looked at the video board, and was like, what? The world ref, you going to help me out there? They were definitely contested catches, but sure enough, no, there was no flag to be called there. Brian Corney with 2 really solid reps. Mike Norvell giving a lot of praise to him after practice and after the catches there that he had. But, a lot of people very high on Brian Corney. I'm growing into that too. Seeing him develop there, and also had a big catch there on 4th down from Tate Rodemaker against Miami last Saturday night. You're seeing the growth there from Courtney, and it is fun to watch him. Definitely when he's coming down, he's just got really good hands, man, when he's in those contested good coverage from. And it wasn't like these guys were far off. It wasn't like Brian Courtney beat him off on a route or anything. Just, Brian just used his hands, man, and he's really physical, and he came down with 2 nice touchdowns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is a guy converting from quarterback to tight end. And, I remember when he committed to Florida State a year ago after the spring game, people were like, who's this Brian Courtney guy? And I think now you're starting to see it. He's gotten to Florida State. Looked raw in the spring, and then slowly it's just starting to look more natural now at that tight end position. Like you said, one of his best practices to date today, where he was able to seal off Jamie Robinson and Akeem Dent using that 6'4" frame in the end zone and just not letting them get by with 2 strong contested catches. And there were some other plays where he didn't run his route quite right. One of them resulted in a Travis J one-handed interception. So there's still some things that the true freshman has to clean up, but you're definitely seeing the signs there. And Cam McDonald going to probably be moving on from the program this offseason due to eligibility. I believe, you're going to need someone to step up as a receiving tight end next year. Brian Courtney could very well be that guy. I was going to say, let's let Austin talk about his hoops because he's running out of time here.
I was going to let one last thing, though, just to finish off some of the practices, some of the practice notes, too. Throughout it, watching Jordan Travis, I thought today, a beautiful ball down to Pokey Wilson down the sideline. Florida State on Wednesdays will practice a 1-minute offense starting on their own 25. Absolutely drilled a beautiful toss off to a fade to Pokey Wilson, which I thought was just gorgeous, which led into a Ryan Fitzgerald kick. Dustin, give us a great update there on field goal kicking, since that's the number one thing you go to practice for with your notes on Ryan Fitzgerald, please.
I mean, I do keep an accurate count of all of the kicking between Ryan Fitzgerald and the backup. But regardless, today, pretty solid day for Fitzgerald. He hit a 53-yard field goal on Florida State's 2-minute drive to begin practice. But actually, the defense decided to call a timeout on the play to ice Fitzgerald. Then he came back, hit another 53-yarder that probably would have been good from 60, hit 2 more later in the practice. Now we're talking about Ryan Fitzgerald. He had those struggles to begin the year. Hasn't missed a field goal in a game since the Wake Forest matchup on October 1st. 4-4 on his last 4 attempts. I believe 17 out of 17 on his extra point attempts during that time. So credit to the kid for rebounding from that sluggish start. We talked about Florida State looking for a potential replacement there, and it's really tough for kickers to respond from those type of struggles. I think you really got to credit the coaching staff and Ryan Fitzgerald's mental fortitude to overcome that, get back to the fundamentals, and now he's starting to figure things out again. But Austin Veazey, one team that hasn't been able to figure things out, the Florida State Seminoles on the hardwood, lost their season opener on Monday night to Stetson. What can you tell us about that?
Not just lost. I mean, you could argue they got dominated by a Stetson team that is not good. A team that was projected to be, bottom third in the Atlantic Sun Conference, which if you've even heard of the A-Sun, raise your hand. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one. This is embarrassing. There's no other way to put it. You let a kid that transfers from Ball State to Stetson, played, in 18 games last year, scored 60 total points. You let him score 27. I mean, you talk about shades of Ryan McMahon, if you remember that short, skinny white kid from Louisville. It was the exact same thing. He even did the same. He's turning around while he's shooting from 30 feet away and drains it in front of the bench. Ryan McMahon did the exact same thing probably 5 times against Florida State. If you're gonna let Stetson do this to you, where they're just consistently, getting ball screens, getting the right matchup, taking that guy off the dribble, then either finish at the rim and kicking out. If you're letting Stetson do that, what are you going to do in ACC play when you're playing, Duke and Carolina and Virginia, who has Kihei Clark, who's as good as anyone at breaking down someone off the dribble? What are you going to do then? Florida State's got to get some things figured out defensively. They really have to change the defense. The way Florida State plays basketball, I get it. They want to be in your face. They want to be pressuring you up and down 94 feet, speeding you up, forcing you into bad shots. But they're forcing teams into good shots. That's not what you want. And at the same time, the objective of this defense is to force turnovers. Stetson only turned it over 8 times. Florida State only had 2 steals. So if you're not achieving what you're supposed to be achieving, why are we in this defense to begin with? I get it's the first game, and sure, I might be overreacting, but it's Stetson. You let Stetson shoot 40% from 3. You let them out-rebound you.
Yep.
Something's got to change. I get it. Florida State only has 8 people active right now. That's why they have to change the defense, in my opinion. Either go back to the help and recover that they played in the 16 and 19 range, or just go pack line. I get that's not Florida State's thing, but they got to figure something out. They can't be doing the switch everything, including the bigs, because they're, just time and time again, Naheem McLeod's getting caught on an island. Cameron Corn's getting caught on an island. As good of an athlete as those two are for their size, that's a tough ask of them. It really, really is.
Don't talk to me about Naheem McLeod. 1 out of 5. 2 points, 2 rebounds against Stetson. Had a chance for a block there, I believe, in the first half. Instead, just jumps right into the guy and fouls him for an and one. There were multiple times where he was around the basket trying post moves. They did not work whatsoever. So for a 7'4" center to play like that against Stetson, is there anything positive to look forward to in this front court, VZ? Because it felt like not even just the front court, but the team as a whole really struggled to finish around the basket. And then you look at it from the charity stripe, wasn't very charitable. 14 out of 27 from the line.
Brutal.
That's not what you want to see from the Seminoles.
Absolutely brutal. I really liked what Cameron Corn gave Florida State offensively. As a true freshman, I don't think any of us were expecting to play that much, before guys started getting hurt, but he looked pretty good Monday night. And honestly, so did Tom House. Everyone was like, what is this signing when he committed? But, at halftime, he was your leading scorer.
Mm-hmm.
He's confident. He's got a little bit of swagger to him, and he's not afraid to take a tough shot. That's something Florida State needs, honestly. And Darren Green wasn't great Monday night, but he also played 38 minutes. It's kind of tough to ask a player to do that in this kind of system where, it's a constant motion offense. You're constantly switching on defense. And Stetson was targeting him in one-on-one matchups defensively. So, yeah, I get he has a bad shooting night when he's literally playing every single possession as the primary target, whether it's offensively or defensively.
That's great. So, wait, now, upcoming games for Florida State, switching things around, they're going to go on the road and face UCF, and they want revenge there, too, against UCF. What do you think? Because the big thing to me last year, you had transfers coming. I think Leonard Hamilton was getting acclimated to that, and I just didn't see a lot of true leaders on that team. Whereas you go back in years past, having multiple leaders on that team led them to so many good games, good wins, leading them into tournament runs. Like, just feels like it's very bare right now. You were relying on a lot of young players right now. But the next couple of games, starting off with UCF, can Florida State bounce back?
I mean, they don't really have a choice. Honestly, I mean, you're gonna know as much about any opponent as you will with UCF. Not only have you played them a lot in the last few years, you have a player that was just on that team in Darren Green Jr. who knows that system, knows that staff. May not know the players because UCF has like 8 or 9 newcomers, but he still knows that system, knows that staff, knows what they want to do and what their objectives are. I'm sure he's passing that information along, saying this is how we played at UCF and this is how we got beat in all the games that we got beat. UCF just lost at home in double overtime to UNC Asheville. Let a kid score 40 points. It was kind of incredible to watch. I was on the phone with somebody and we were watching the game together because, we're basketball nerds and we're depressed. But it was just unbelievable to watch them lose that game to UNC Asheville. Again, UNC Asheville is not very good. It's a very similar situation to Stetson, Florida State. I think Stetson's worse and Florida State's better. But it's going to be about 13 total people watching this game Friday night. And sadly, I will be one of them.
So with this loss to Stetson, is it time to panic for Florida State, or do you consider this maybe more of a fluke? At what point of the season, moving forward now, if Florida State loses to UCF, looking forward after that, you've got Troy, Florida, Mercer, Siena before you play Purdue. At what point early in the season, as it is in Florida State's integrating all of these new faces, they've got some injuries, but when does the panic meter start to rise a little bit for Leonard Hamilton?
It really just depends how they play Friday night. I got to see how they respond. Is this a team that's going to just let them be pushed over and they're going to lay on the road like a dead possum, or are they going to fight back and, try and win a ball game? That's the big thing about all these injuries. I think Jalen Gainey was the biggest vocal leader just because he has that experience. Mm-hmm. And then you have a guy like Chandler Jackson, who I really think is going to be special for this team in the coming years. He kind of has that alpha mentality, bulldog mentality, and he hasn't played yet. And, I'm not expecting him to be that guy when he gets on the floor, whenever he is in this next couple of weeks. But especially Gainey, that loss was huge, not just defensively, but from a mindset standpoint of getting guys prepared. I think that was big. And then the Baba Miller news, I think, just took the wind out of everybody's sails. We can talk about what Baba's impact is on the floor, but you have to also view it from a team standpoint where they're seeing it going, why are they doing this to us? And, we can't really estimate what happened inside that locker room, but from the way they responded Monday night, it wasn't great. And also at the same point, I feel like the guys never thought they were actually going to lose that game to Stetson until there was about 6 minutes left. And they're like, oh yeah, we might actually lose this. And then you finally started seeing that hustle, that get up. It was tough to watch. It was so tough to watch.
As you said, a disappointing start. A lot of chaos around the team right now. We'll see if they're able to respond on Friday night at UCF. 7:00 will be the tip-off there. But Austin, real quick, I know you've got to head out of here shortly. I don't know if Logan's about to ask something about basketball. He looks kind of miffed. But Austin, can you provide your score prediction for Saturday night, Florida State Syracuse?
Yeah, I'm expecting a big performance from the running backs. Even though Syracuse was a little bit better against Pitt, only allowing about 3.4, 3.5 yards per carry. Trey Benson, I looked it up earlier. He has forced 59 missed tackles in 89 rush attempts. Everybody that's ahead of him has almost 200 rushing attempts, and he is fifth total in missed tackles. Absolute beast. I know Syracuse's linebackers have played pretty well, but I think the Florida State rushing attack's going to be pretty good. I'll take Florida State. I think it's going to be a little bit tighter than the spread has. I got a 31-27 Florida State.
Whoa. Tight one. Okay. Tight. We're not. I'm not as tight as you, but I'm close to it.
Dino Babers always seems to play Florida State a little bit closer than he should.
He does. I do think this is a different one. I'll get my score prediction later, but
yeah.
And with that, I got to go. Peace.
Go to your meeting. 9 p.m. meetings should be against the rules, against the law, or anything. Actually, I've never seen anything like that.
If you ever try that with me, I ain't sure.
I know for damn sure. I know better than that, buddy. I know better than that. But let's jump into some Florida State versus Syracuse to end off the podcast, and D-Lou and I will give our score predictions. Overall thoughts on this one. We had Mike on earlier, gave us some good, info all around Syracuse and Dino Babers, what they're going to be bringing in this team. But, one thing that I took away from that, man, health, and it's really hurting for Syracuse right now. Whereas on the trajectory for Florida State, it is just going upwards, where Florida State didn't even have to play Trayshawn Ward last week. We talked to Mike McAllister today about that, and he said, felt like if they needed him for an emergency situation, they could have thrown him out there, but didn't feel like there was really a need whenever you watch Trey Benson do what he's doing along with Lawrence Toafili. I think Florida State has a big-time advantage with being a healthier team coming into this one. Fabian Lovett expected to play for a third week in a row, adding into that defensive line, whereas Syracuse has struggled on the offensive line side of things. And, man, a healthy Florida State defensive line is a menace to any team in the country.
Can't argue with that. As you said, and Mike said, Syracuse has had some real struggles up front with that offensive line. 9 different players have started a game for Syracuse in 2022, and they've allowed 28 sacks, which is an average of over 3 a game, one of the very worst in the entire country. So with the way that Syracuse likes to play offensively, which means if Schrader is going to play, Schrader and Sean Tucker are going to carry the load, not only with Schrader's arm, but he's going to get involved on the ground as well. Florida State, they're really going to have to shut down that rushing attack for Syracuse. And I think when you look at it over this 3-game losing streak for the Orange, they've only averaged 70 rushing yards a game during this streak. And that's not going to do it against Florida State's defense. They've really responded well the last 2 weeks against Georgia Tech and Miami. There's some momentum there on both sides of the ball. The offense firing on all cylinders right now as well. So, you've just got a hot Florida State team and, getting healthy at the right time, whereas Syracuse dealing with some injuries and in the midst of this losing streak. But at the same time, they're still a very capable and competitive football team. And like Austin said, Dino Babers, it always seems like he plays Florida State a little bit closer than you might expect. And that's kind of where I'm leaning on Saturday night right now as well.
One thing I want to note on Mike Norvell on road games this season has been nice. Understand you get the NC State loss there, and that definitely stinks. But, Florida State started off the season against LSU on the road, which is now a top 10 team in the college football playoff rankings. That makes that win so much better and better on Florida State's resume. But Mike Norvell has prepped his team to play really good football on the road. And like Mike said earlier, I don't give a damn what the stadium's called. It's still always going to be Carrier Dome no matter what. But inside that dome, there will be a good crowd. But Florida State has done a really good job of playing. And whenever they're traveling, Mike Norvell has set up some beautiful drives. They're always scoring. We talk about in the press box when we're at home games. But Florida State on drives to start off the game can sometimes put the crowd away. And it happened. It was last week or so where Syracuse suffered a pick 6 there, and that crowd just fell down. Florida State can do that with a Mike Norvell drive that has been very successful with Jordan Travis and Trayshawn Ward back, Trey Benson too, balling like he is to put that crowd away. But I've just been really pleased to see Mike Norvell get his team prepared for road games this season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and credit to Mike Norvell, because dating back to last year, he finally won his first road game at Florida State whenever they went to North Carolina. And ever since then, we'd have to pull up the record. But Florida State, I would say a positive record in road games, and they played very well away from home so far this season. I know they had that collapse against North Carolina State, but they were right there with a chance to knock off a ranked team on the road. And I think in this one, you mentioned the way that Florida State's offense has been able to come out of the gate, really put some points on the board. That's what you're going to have to do against Syracuse, because for whatever reason, this is a team that starts fast, an 85-30 scoring advantage in the first quarter so far this season. So that means Florida State, they're going to need to be on their toes from the opening kickoff. They're going to need to convert on that first scripted drive of the game, and it would be huge for the defense to force a couple punts in that opening quarter, because it seems like Dino Babers, kind of the same thing as Mike Norvell. He comes out with a pretty good game plan and executes it early on, and then maybe things taper off a little bit throughout the game. We'll just have to see, and it's really going to depend if Schrader suits up for this one, because the Orange were they compiled less than 200 yards last week in the loss to Pittsburgh. Backup Carlos Del Rio Wilson just doesn't have the capability or the experience that offense that Schrader does.
No, and definitely if you're going to trot out a backup there, if Schrader's not able to play, we saw how that worked for Miami last weekend. Florida State's defense and Adam Fuller will send everything on you. To go back to that Jamie Robinson play, man, it just gets to a point where it's not fair. And, watching Odell Hagens, what he's been able to do with that defensive line with a healthy Fabian Lovett in the mix alongside Robert Cooper, Jared Verse, who I think is going to have a good time going back to Syracuse. Once again, I know a lot of their fans in the stands won't be happy seeing him on the field, definitely with a developed and much even more improved, bigger size Verse with almost that same speed. But, Florida State has a big chance here, I think, to put this game away quicker. I don't think it's going to be so much of a blowout like I was expecting going down to Miami, but I think Florida State is going to take care of business, and I think they're going to take care of business pretty early. I think they know what's at stake. Florida State has a chance here to finish off the season with just 3 losses, and it's going to be fun going back after this regular season is over, is going back to look at what we were predicting in our season preview and be like, wow, I went 8-4. I was initially going 7-5, D-Lou, but during the show, the gut just went with the gut there and went 8-4. I think I predicted Florida State to win this game against Syracuse going into the season.
I think we all did.
Yeah, and I don't see that much changing for me, and I think the same thing is going to be for you, D-Lou. This team, just throughout the week and watching practices, man, it helps so much being in the inside there, and Mike Norvell gives us the great access like he does to see this team and how focused they've been. And there's nothing during this week that tells me, oh, they're not even thinking about Syracuse or they're overlooking anything. They haven't done that all throughout the season. They've been very keyed in on their opponents ahead, no matter if it's Duquesne, Boston College, who's an awful team this year. This team has stayed really direct with their
random Boston College shot. Jesus.
Well, they deserve it. Awful team. Am I wrong, chat? Jeez.
They did lose to pretty sure they lost to UConn a few weeks ago.
Yeah. They're a really, really bad team. But I don't think this is a really bad team, but I think Syracuse is down and hurting pretty badly, let's be honest. And I think Florida State's going to take care of business. Who's going to be a key player or two for this game on Saturday night for Florida State? Like we said, Schrader, don't know if he's going to be fully healthy. There's also some other players too. Sean Tucker too. Doesn't seem like he's 100%. I'm just looking straight at the defensive line, and whatever they want to do, they can do. I'm gonna go straight. I'm gonna go. It's either between. It's easy to go with Jared Verse on the outside. He's always gonna do his thing. I'm gonna go Fabo. I think Fabo needs to have a big game here. It's a big bad game too for him too. Look at Syracuse's offensive line and last couple of weeks struggling there. I think taking advantage there of that offensive line and ruining Sean Tucker's potential there to have a decent game and give Syracuse any kind of ground game would be huge. What do you think, D-Lou?
For me, it's a little cliche, but I've got to go with Trey Benson because it really feels like this guy is heated up over the last 2 weeks. That career performance against Georgia Tech, he follows it up with another career performance and 2 touchdowns against Miami there. I forget exactly what Austin's stat was, but I think it was 59 missed tackles that he's forced. Regardless, it feels like every game this guy's getting hit in the backfield 1, 2, 3, 4 times, then bouncing outside for 15 or 20. There's just something different about Trey Benson in that backfield compared to Treshaun Ward and Lawrence Toafili, who are both very good options. But it seems like Benson kind of has the burst, and then he also has the ability to really churn through contact. And I think that's something that's been really impressive, especially as of late. This is a guy who isn't even 2 years removed from a serious knee injury where he tore basically every tendon in his knee. So for him to be having this success at this time for Florida State, it's huge. And you look over at the defensive side of the ball for Syracuse, allowing 141.1 rushing yards per game. That's 62nd in the country. And as we mentioned, whenever Mike was on here, it's jumped up to over 230 yards a game during this 3-game losing streak. So it's going to be huge, not just for Benson, but the other running backs as well, to come out there and perform, because this might be another game like Miami where the Seminoles are really able to control the clock and the game on the ground.
I think they will control this game. I really do. On the road this weekend on Saturday night, Florida State will be kicking off at 8 p.m. on the ACC network. Mike Norvell and the Seminoles traveling up there. Treshaun Ward, we'll see if he is going to make a return on the field on Saturday. If you need him, if you don't, but I would imagine they'd like to get Treshaun Ward back in the mix to finish off the latter half of the season. I don't know who went first last week. I think I went first last week.
I think it's me.
I think it is you. If you want to go ahead and give it a shot. We're on a winning streak right now too. All of us are. Pretty good one.
I'm trying to think I think my last,
is it NC State?
I'm pretty sure I predicted a loss. I think it was Wake. I predicted Florida State to beat Wake.
Oh, so that was the last one.
Yeah, I think I stuck with the loss against NC State, but yeah, like you said, a pretty nice little streak for all of us. Actually, if you go to NoleGameDay.com on Friday, whenever we drop our staff score predictions for this week against Syracuse, check out the records for this season, because I think everybody, not just us on the podcast, the whole staff for the website has been doing a really good job with their predictions this season. And we don't collaborate or talk about any of these before the games. I ask for score predictions. They get sent to me. We put them into an article, and I'm very surprised with how accurate. And then the scores are also pretty close to each other. But anyway, I'll quit nerding out. Going over to my score prediction for Florida State Syracuse. Coming in a couple weeks ago, whenever Syracuse was 6-0 and they had that 21-7 lead against Clemson in Death Valley, I was a little worried about the Orange. The offense was clicking. The defense really had stepped up. But then, the injuries have decimated them as of late. We're not quite sure on the availability of Garrett Schrader, and regardless, he missed last week, and it seems like he might not be 100% if he is able to play or not. Sean Tucker, definitely a weapon on offense, but I think Florida State on the other side, offensively, should be able to control the game, like I said earlier, on the ground with their trio of running backs. I don't know that we see a big passing performance from Jordan Travis, but I do think he gets a couple plays there on the ground to help FSU. And this one ends up being a little closer than I think is expected, but I'm going to go Florida State 31, Syracuse 17. I wanted to go over 40, but just looking at their defense, only have allowed 20-plus points 4 times this season. 2 of those times have been in the last 3 games, but I think it would take something, a really explosive performance for Florida State to get over 40.
Okay. I like it. I'm right there with a lot of things that you just said, D-Lou. I think health things is the biggest concern for Syracuse going into this one. And, not a fully healthy Schrader. We don't even know if he'll be playing too. And then looking at Sean Tucker too, not being fully 100% is really hurting Syracuse right now. I really do feel like if Florida State has a successful drive to start off this game, man, they can manage it all throughout the night. And I really liked how Florida State has played all throughout the week or all throughout the season on the road. I feel like that's something that is worth noticing going back from last year and the improvement Mike Norvell's made inside that locker room, getting his team prepared on the road. They just seem sharper, man, and they seem dialed in to take care of business and get the heck out of there. I think Florida State's got this one in the bag after going into the third quarter, I'll be honest with you. I got Florida State 34, Syracuse. I wanted to say if Schrader's not out there, it's going to be 30. It's going to be 34.
I don't know.
13.
I'll be honest. I don't know if Syracuse gets over 10 if Schrader isn't able to play. I'm kind of projecting this based on him giving it a go, kind of like we saw from Tyler Van Dyke last week. We'll
Yeah.
see which way it goes. Does he stay in the game, or does he have to go out like Van Dyke? But if Carlos Del Rio Wilson has to go in there, I'm not confident that the Orange are able to have basically any offensive success against FSU.
No, they're a better team than Miami. Last week, I projected Florida State to just take care of business and then obliterate Miami. I think Syracuse, Babers always coaches a pretty good game against Florida State. Feels like almost like their Super Bowl throughout the season sometimes. But this one, it just ain't going to work, Dino. But I got Florida State 34. Syracuse, should I give them 14? I'm going to go 13. I just don't know. Even if he is healthy, they're going to be licking their chops coming after him with that Syracuse offensive line. And eventually it just ain't going to work, just kind of how we saw against Miami last week with Tyler Van Dyke. It just a couple hits is just going to do it. So, yeah, I think feel pretty good about that one.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be another dominant. That would be a dominant win, a really nice win on the road for Florida State from a team that was starting off hot for Syracuse, 6-0 run that they made, man. That would be a nice win, and that leads you into the last two games of the season against the Raging Cajuns, Billy Napier's old team, and then the Florida Gators at home, which Florida State will end off the season with 2 home games, which will be fun.
We'll see. This could be a big one for Florida State. Maybe not as pretty on the scoreboard, but I think a win on the road over a gritty Syracuse team, that's something that everyone would be happy with coming into the year, and maybe it propels Florida State inside the top 20 of the top 25. And I think we're counting a win against Louisiana next weekend, maybe 15 or so, going into that game on Friday, Black Friday against Florida. Do your shopping early.
Yeah, absolutely. So good stuff here. Appreciate Mike coming on here earlier on the show, giving us some good stuff from Syracuse's side. VZ, appreciate you coming on here and giving us some basketball takes. I don't feel too happy about what he's got with that basketball squad right now, but we'll continue to give you guys coverage on that end. Dustin Lewis, our editor-in-chief at NoleGaming.com. As always, you can listen to podcasts on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. If you're on YouTube right now, before you leave, we definitely appreciate it if you just leave a like on the video. That would be much appreciated. What are you laughing at, D-Lou?
Just you begging for likes. It always makes me laugh.
I would like to get you some viewers to get your silly takes, so I need to get viewers to see them. So that's the last I can do. Appreciate everybody coming on here. Sorry if I sound like I've got everything in my nose, just because I absolutely do. I could throw up about 2 pounds of mucus right now, so I don't think anybody wants to see that. I need to get off here immediately because it's coming quick. Everybody have a great weekend. Enjoy football. We will talk to you guys during our instant reaction for another late night one. Another late night on a Saturday, probably Sunday, early morning, midnight run there after Florida State takes on Syracuse and Babers. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll talk to you guys next Saturday. I'm losing it. Bye.
Mama told me not to say a word. 17.5, same color t-shirt. Mama told me not to say a word. 17.5, same color t-shirt. Mama told me not to say a word. 17.5, same color t-shirt. Mama told me not to say a word.